And welcome into a special episode of the MLB Draft Live Watch Along here on Twins Takes. I'm Twin Central, joined by Troy and Twins Insider. Fellas, how you guys doing on this special draft day?
I'm really excited. I've been really excited about the MLB draft over the last few years. We've taken some really interesting prospects, and now you're in a really interesting position to potentially take a top 2 player in the draft. There's a guy that might fall from number 1, probably not, but you never know.
Yeah, I'm fired up. I mean, if you do this right, you're getting a guy who's like a possible Hall of Famer. So it's a big day for the organization. Going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll see. The White Sox are just about to go on the clock. They're still doing all the, hype around the NBC set. I believe this is the first year the draft has been on NBC, so they're trying to make it into a bigger deal. I don't know that they'll ever get there with the MLB draft just because even these top elite prospects are going to spend a year plus in the minors. It's not like the NFL or NBA where these guys are immediately going to become the face of your franchise, but I give them at least a little bit of props for trying to do something about it. So just off the cuff, of the top 3, or maybe somebody not in the top 3, we're probably 30 minutes from the Twins selecting. Who do you think it's going to be?
Consensus seems like it's going to be Von Lackey because the Rays really do seem to like Grady Emerson, who's considered the best consensus prep player in the class. If they do take a Von Lackey, the Twins have Grady Emerson right there, and he's considered the worst out of the 3. But anytime you have a chance to take a middle infield prospect, top of the class, you take it. But I think the vibe is that it's probably going to be Von Lackey, and I'd be probably ecstatic for that pick. If it's somehow not Von Lackey, I would hope it's just a guy like Drew Burress, considering he was probably the number 1 player in the class a long time before this draft was online, and I've always liked Drew Burress. I've also liked Jackson Flora for a while, but at best case scenario, it probably has to be Von Lackey.
Yeah, I mean the high school shortstop is kind of the smart long-term play, so that just feels like a Rays pick. So like Troy said, I think you're looking at. I think I'd be pretty surprised if the White Sox take Lackey. So you're really looking at Lackey, Flora, Burress, or a complete thing out of left field. I think it'll be Lackey. I think it just makes a lot of sense.
And what's interesting about the Rays is that nobody really seems to know what they're about to do. Like, the rumor is Grady Emerson, but there was just a report, I believe came out this morning about, they could take Jackson Flora somehow. But you never really know. There's always a lot of drafts that can become unpredictable at the top. So, we'll see. It seems set in stone, but you never know.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go the opposite direction of you guys. I think it's going to be Ross Chalowski. I think the White Sox are going to go under slot. We saw them make a trade yesterday for the 34th overall pick. That to me kind of seems like they're going to try to go under slot and then slide somebody down later in the draft. So I think that means Ross Chalowski falls. I think the Twins will have their choice of Von Lackey or Chalowski, assuming Emerson does go to the Rays, which it seems like that's what it's going to be. So I'm going to go with Roch. We'll know here in about 25 to 30 minutes. So that's where I'm at with things. I think I would prefer Chalowski over Von Lackey, but both are very, very good prospects. So I won't be upset either way. The only way I'll really be upset is if they do go outside of the consensus top 3. And if they do that, I think it will be Flora who they pick.
Yeah, that would be really interesting from the White Sox. And speaking of that trade, just speaking on it, it's a really interesting trade. You trade away Jacob Gonzalez, who was first round pick a couple of years ago. And you also trade away left-handed pitcher in Brandon Iser. Now, the White Sox have 2 really good lefties in their bullpen already, and Sean Newcomb and Ryan Hudson, who performed well this year. Iser has some really under the hood really good analytics backing him. So I think the Pirates, it really helps out their bullpen specifically, and with Gonzalez, they're planning to play him at short. Connor Griffin's out for a long time. I don't know if I really like that for them, especially when Gonzalez made his major league debut against the Twins about a month ago or so, and he was immediately slotted into first base, which I know the White Sox had Murakami out for a while, but that was just really interesting to me. And now he's playing shortstop, which I don't know if I trust.
Yeah, I know that in 2023 that it was rumored that was like the smokescreen. The Twins were going to take Gonzalez. He did not impress me in his pretty limited action. I do have a question for you guys, and I know you're not supposed to draft for need, and I don't think you should do this, but there has been a lot of talk that like Flora could honestly come up and debut at the end of this year, kind of like Garrett Crochet style. And of course, the Twins do have a lot of need in their bullpen. So again, I don't think it'd be a good idea, but do you think that they would do that kind of reach just to get a guy who they could slot in maybe at the end of the year? I hope not, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I would hope not either, but that is kind of an interesting, it did work out for Crochet in the end, and the White Sox did that, and then, but it was also kind of a weirder time because I believe he debuted around the 2020 COVID season. That was just extremely weird year, and so a lot of weird things happened, like Kenta Maeda finishing third in the Cy Young race. But I if that is like the plan with Flora, like I don't really like that. Like the plan is that he could potentially be in the pen at the end of the year when the Twins could honestly, they're kind of soft buying right now. They're only a game back of a wild card spot right now, but honestly, realistically, they could be, probably 6 games out by the end of the year, and like they're not talking about a playoff spot. So like if you're planning on a hypothetical playoff push, like is Flora probably the player that could help you out the most? Yes, but that's not what you're drafting for at the MLB draft. You're not going to call some guy immediately up. You're not the Los Angeles Angels, who have done that with their last few draft picks. Ryan Johnson, Christian Moore come to mind. It didn't work out for Zach Neno, but it doesn't work out for everybody. And some guys just need a lot of development. And, Flora is not this amazing pitch. Is a really good prospect, but he's not this amazing top tier pitching prospect that we've seen in the draft in past years, like Skeens. So, I think there's just some really rare exceptions. Flora isn't quite there yet, but it is an interesting thing to point out.
Yeah, if they're that worried about, trying to make a playoff push that they're drafting a guy based off that, I think that would be very misguided. The odds that he comes up, is effective as a 21-year-old straight out of college is just pretty unlikely. Even if we have seen a few guys do it before, if that's what you're drafting for, just trade a guy for a good proven reliever and draft the guy that you think is the best player on the board long term. We did see the Twins make a minor trade yesterday. We have a comment here from Caboose. Thoughts on the Tommy Nance trade while we're waiting for the picks. So let's get to that. The Twins traded prospect Ryan Sprock, I believe is how you say it. He was the 8th round selection in last year's draft. A somewhat interesting prospect. Wasn't a top 30 prospect on any list that I've seen. Wasn't a top 30 prospect on the list that I put out at the beginning of the year. But he was interesting at A-ball. But in return, the Twins get Tommy Nance, a veteran 35-year-old reliever from the Toronto Blue Jays. Not a total back-end option, but a guy that you can trust in the 7th, maybe the 8th inning. Decent strikeout numbers. FIP that's a little bit higher than his ERA has been, but this is a guy that's pitched real innings for the Toronto Blue Jays the last few years. We know they're a good team. So what do you guys think of this move? I'm personally a big fan of it. I think this is the exact type of guy that they need to be acquiring, guys that are, better than Eric Orsi, who we saw be the corresponding move for Tommy Nance on the roster. I think I tweeted this out yesterday. Their goal for the trade deadline should be to get 2 or 3 relievers better than Eric Orsi. In my opinion, Tommy Nance is exactly that.
Yeah, you want to, fill in these really small margins that for other teams are really small, but for the Twins is also pretty big. Nance has probably been the 6th best reliever in a pretty loaded Toronto bullpen in the past, but he's been reliable for them. He's given them innings this year. He has decent strikeout numbers, like you mentioned, and for this Twins bullpen, that's exactly what they need. They need good strikeout numbers. Andrew Morris has given you those strikeouts, but you need somebody more than that. And Nance is a veteran, especially. He gives you those innings. His savant numbers are pretty decent. Expected ERA is probably a little bit worse, but I think for the Twins, you can live with that a little bit, especially if he's only really pitching in the 7th inning. And again, you just need a guy that can get whiffs, can get strikeouts. The Twins, again, exactly need that guy. And you're giving up not a big time prospect. This is a guy that has really emerged over the last few years. He pitched a couple of times in the playoffs last season. didn't pitch in the World Series for the Blue Jays, but he did pitch in the ALDS against the Yankees. So, he is a guy with some playoff experience. If you do somehow make the playoffs, this is a guy that you can rely on. And, he's probably going to pitch a little bit more in high leverage with the Twins, probably. But, again, this is the kind of move you make. You're getting a veteran as well. And that's kind of what I like. And now, again, you have to keep filling in the margins. You probably, like you mentioned, need you need 2 or 3 more guys, and I would aim that they're probably aim for another veteran. And then again, like Twins Insider and I have talked about in the past, like try to get a reliever with control if you can, because you have the prospect capital to do that. And if Tommy Nance is only going to cost you a guy that's not even on your top 30, like what's the market for other relievers? So it's going to be really interesting how that shapes out.
Yeah, and I like this move. I see Kabuth has another comment here that says he likes to be able to get talent without giving up a future to the MLB team. And I agree. I saw a couple people, doing kind of prospect clutching things, but Sprock was an 8th round pick. He had 5 home runs in A-ball. He's a catcher and infielder, which basically means he's not really a catcher. So that value isn't really, he's just kind of a non-prospect. He kind of compares to me in many ways to Fedko, who was a 8th, 12th round pick. And we've seen what that looks like in the big leagues. So any pick after that first maybe 4 or 5 rounds is pretty much statistically not going to be anything. So I like that move a lot because I don't think Nance is great, but you basically got him for free as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would go that far. Is there a small chance that Sprock is like a good caliber MLB player for a few years? Sure, there is. He's only, 21 years old or something. Like he's not at the Fedco level where he's 26 and in AAA. But again, Fedco is doing this at AAA, which is more impressive than doing it at A-ball. Is like there's a small chance that Sprock is good, but he's about the absolute low end of what you're going to have to give up for a quality reliever, for like a Tommy Nance. Like you said, there were people doing the prospect hugging thing, which look, I totally get. People fall in love with their own prospects and dream on them, but look at the guys that have come up through the Twins organization. A lot of them, don't pan out. That's just the nature of the game. Could he pan out? Absolutely. But I think this is a completely fine trade. And like, if you want the Twins to be buyers, which I think a lot of fans do, you're going to have to accept that they're going to have to give up prospects. Like, you can't hold on to all prospects and get, good MLB players in return. Like, that's just something that you have to accept. We saw what the Twins got back last year at the deadline. Like, there are good prospects that get moved. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and people justifiably get mad in the other way when you hold on to so-and-so because you don't want to give him up for, a good reliever in 24, or a good starter who could have given them depth. And yeah, it's good that they got to hold on to Keishel or Lee or whoever the prospect would have been at the time, but they also collapsed, missed the playoffs, and blew their team up. Like, at some point, you have to give up something to get something, and I think most people agree with that. And generally, the safer bet is to get proven MLB players.
Yeah, that's just always what the case is going to be. Sometimes you just have to take the risk too. And the Twins took a risk at the 22 deadline and they missed the playoffs. And Jorge Lopez and Tyler Mahle weren't big impact guys, but those were the kinds of trades that you kind of had to make it when the Twins were in that position. And you shouldn't be scared to give up some good prospects, because in the end they also could easily just flame out like CES did. So you kind of have to not be worried sometimes. Prospects are prospects. They could flame out, they could not. So there's always just a 50-50 risk. It doesn't work out, whatever. But it just happens. So you have to take these risks. There's not a big chance Brian Sprock is going to be a good MLB player in the first place. But speaking of which, it reminds me of past first round picks the Twins have made. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, I pulled up the Wikipedia page here of Twins first round picks just to get an idea of the type of prospect that you're getting with this pick. Obviously, the Twins, we're looking here at the Sean Johnson resume. That's 2017 and beyond. I believe his first draft was probably his best, although the best player in that draft ended up being Brent Rooker, who broke out far after he was on the Twins. So they got Royce Lewis first overall. That's been largely a disappointment. It looked like it was a great hit at the time. And then Brent Rooker, who they got in the comp round, I believe 35th overall, probably the best first round pick the Twins have made. Unfortunately, it didn't come to fruition in a Twins uniform, which was unfortunate, but we saw him take 2 hitters here, and then they followed up with Trevor Larnach in 2018 out of that stacked Oregon State team. Larnach, for all the faults that he has actually ended up being, looking at this list, one of their better first round selections.
Yeah, that if you look at the 2018 draft, the people around him in the teens and 20s, most of them never even made the league. So that was actually like a miserable draft class in hindsight. So Larnach is going to have like a 10-year MLB career. So that, like you said, sadly, that's actually one of the better hits.
Yeah, 2018 draft class. That was the Casey Mize draft, Joey Bart, Alec Bowman, the top 3, Nick Madrigal, and Jonathan India. Just around the players taken around Trevor Larnach at that spot. Brady Singer, I remember, was a player I really wanted in that draft. Nolan Gorman was the pick right before. Bryce Terang was the pick after. Nico Horner is there later down the line. So there was a couple of pretty decent big leaguers around there. But, again, Trevor Larnach's probably one of the better players from that draft already. 2019 is the very infamous Keone Cavaco pick, and that's a bust pick. We all know that. He was released at the start of, I believe it was last year. He never made it out of high A, and that's just that is just for a guy who took 13th overall, you probably didn't anticipate that. And sometimes prospects just don't develop. It just really sucked that it was a guy that you took in the first round that you had a lot of hope in.
Yeah, and Cavaco at the time he was picked, it was lauded as an odd pick. Like, it was pretty much completely off the board. He was more of a 2nd to 3rd round talent in the eyes of many evaluators. That one, obviously, of this list, by far the worst. Aaron Sabato in 2020 wasn't much better. Was that the COVID draft? I believe it was, right?
Yes, there's some good players taken in there, but the scouting, it will give them some leeway because of that. Yeah,
I'll give them leeway on the actual selection. The bigger thing is that I don't like drafting first baseman or, corner outfielders just because they have to hit. Like, there's no defense to fall back on. There's likely not much base running to fall back on. We saw that with Sabato. We did see how that worked out well with Rooker, I guess. So, like, you can hit on them. If you do hit on them, they're going to be a middle of the order bat, but there's just, not much wiggle room if things go wrong. They followed up in 2021 with Chase Petty, a high school pitcher, was almost immediately traded for Sonny Gray. So while that draft selection wasn't all that good, like, the result of it ended up being better than anybody they picked, just because Sonny Gray, who there is some whispers that the Twins, might look for a reunion with him. I would totally be on board with that. He's one of my favorite Twins pitchers in recent memory. So the Petty pick, he's still somewhat young, could work out, but he looks like to be a non-factor for the Cincinnati Reds. Noah Miller, another high schooler, I believe out of Wisconsin, a glove first guy. He's in the Dodgers now. He's part of that Manuel Margot trade. He actually is hitting a little bit for the Dodgers, so he's somebody to keep an eye on. And then 2022, Brooks Lee, the 8th overall pick in that draft out of Cal Poly, obviously still plays for the Twins. He's had somewhat of a resurgence here in, his last stand. So we'll see. This is the kind of type of guys the Twins are going to get. We saw him get Walker Jenkins. The rest of these guys haven't debuted yet, so it's hard to know too much how to grade them. They all look really good until they debut, and then we find out their flaws. But that's a type of prospect that you're getting in the first round is, good players. They're going to have flaws, and it comes down to how you develop them.
I think the Lee pick, I actually want to zero in on that for a second, because we all know, like you mentioned, the flaws and the kind of difficulties he's had, but it does speak to why people always go, "Oh, why'd you draft another shortstop? Why'd you draft another center field?" Because think like Lee was not able to play the position he was drafted at, but because he was a shortstop, he was able to slide down. He's turned into like a decent third baseman, and the bat has come around a little. Like, if Lee was drafted as a third baseman and he wasn't able to play third, he would be like a DH already. So just that positional, you can always move guys down, but you can't move them back up. So you want to draft the most athletic positions. So just when people get mad if we take a high school shortstop, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I will say, looking at this list, the one like sort of trend that I would say I notice is, in 2017 they took a corner outfielder, 2018 they took a corner outfielder, 2020 they took a first baseman. They've completely stopped taking these, for a while there, they took these big, powerful guys that didn't have much athleticism.
Well, that was
Over the
also when
last-
power was that was like Juice Ball era, to be fair.
Right.
That
Yeah,
was a power
absolutely.
team,
But since then, they've kind of leaned into the more athletic types, I would say. You know, Noah Miller was a pick that was taken because of his glove, his defense, his athleticism. Brooks Lee, not quite that, but like you said, he was a shortstop, so we've seen him get moved to third. He has plenty of room to go down the defensive hierarchy. Walker Jenkins, when he was taken, was a guy that was seen as a center fielder. Now he's probably more of a right fielder. Kalen Culpepper, again, you know, a shortstop that you can slide down the defensive spectrum, which I think he's probably not a shortstop long-term, but he'll be given a chance. I think a reason that he might not be the long-term shortstop is because of their first-round pick last year, Merrick Houston, a really athletic, high IQ defensive first shortstop. So I would say they've leaned into this more, you know, defense first, versatility, a little bit more athletic type in the last few drafts.
So is Wallner? I thought Wallner was like kind of a rooker. I thought he was like the 38th pick in 2019, but he's not listed on here. But
And speaking of Merrick
I
Houston,
guess
just
not.
in general, going back to him and just his season, this season in general, he's had a really good season just in general, and that's really flown under the radar. His OPS is around the 800 just overall for the year. He just got called up to Double A. He's played 15 games, and he's brought in a lot of speed and defense. And you know, for this Twins team that doesn't really have a lot of speed, that hasn't really stolen a lot of bases, when Merrick Houston is ready, and if the trends are correct, about a year or two, he could be the Twins starting shortstop by 2028 on opening day. And I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Breaking news.
Well, I got some bad news for you.
Good news, everyone.
It's time for the news.
So Jim Collis here, I believe he's on MLB Network, maybe says Ross Chalowski, UCLA shortstop, will go 1-1 to the White Sox to kick off the MLB draft. So my prediction of Chalowski to the Twins does end up being wrong. I think this is what a large majority of the people expected. We'll see. This still isn't officially announced, but I assume for Collis to tweet that out is going to be correct. So Chalowski 1-1 to the White Sox. What are your guys' initial reactions on that?
Yeah, we talked about it before. There's so many smoke screens around the draft every year. I don't even know why people do this. It was obviously going to be him for months, and then people tried to they tried to act like it wasn't him. Who are you tricking? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't really surprise me. He was easily the consensus 1-1, so I don't know who you would take besides him. And also, speaking of other news, the Twins just claimed another reliever as of about 5 minutes ago. It's Jack Anderson from the Boston Red Sox. He's a 26-year-old righty who was pitching 8 innings this year, 3.38 ERA, and he's pitched mostly and was just called up from AAA recently. Was mostly a starting pitcher down at Worcester. So the Twins claim another guy that can probably give them some length. That's probably what the main thought is for me. I don't really know much about this guy. Honestly, I don't think I've really heard of him, and I think I'm pretty good on random guys that are on the waiver wire. But Jack Anderson claimed by the Twins, and so again gives you some length out of the pen. Twins don't really have a fifth guy right now, and that's even with Bailey Ober backup. So interesting that they get some more depth, at least in the long relief department, which I like, in that you don't have to put too much pressure on Mike Paredes in that spot.
This guy looks pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie. He does have a splitter. That's the second most used pitch. That's probably why they want him. But I'm just looking at his ERAs and FIPS, and he's been good at Double-A last year. He's not been good above there at all. It's been really bad, actually.
Yeah, but there's I'm not really putting much on it. Just some length. He probably gets DFA'd after about a week from now.
I mean, he had a five expected FIP and ERA in 60 innings in AAA this year. That's pretty rough.
Yeah, this looks like to be a soft passing righty that has absolutely putrid stuff. I can't say that I get the idea here. I think he's just filler, kind of like Troy said, just insurance. We've seen the starting rotation kind of be diminished. Even the AAA rotation doesn't really have anybody interesting at this point. So this is probably a guy that you keep on the 40-man roster for a few days just as insurance, to get through the trade deadline, and then probably, or not through the trade deadline, through the All-Star break, and then gets DFA'd. So I can't say that I envision Jack Anderson being even a short-term addition to this roster.
Yeah, I would bet he lasts maybe one game and then gets immediately DFA'd, something like that. Twins felt like the Twins had a lot of those kinds of relievers, but a lot of those relievers actually pitched a decent amount last year.
Is this the Joe Ryan replacement when he goes to the Dodgers? That's my question.
Maybe. But yeah, the draft's about to start. I think I kind of got spoiled on the first 2 picks, but I'm not going to check on who the Twins pick. But speaking of the Twins, we haven't actually really talked about their on-field play, and they've lost the last two nights to the Angels and to the last game of the series to the Guardians. But the first 2 games against the Guardians, they won the series, and it was just really it was 2 really exciting games and really well pitched games. And I think really well managed games in some senses by Derek Shelton. But first off, talking about Tuesday's game, Josh Bradley struck out 10 batters in 7 innings pitched. But mainly, I want to talk about Wednesday's game, which was a really exciting game. The Twins able to really fight back in that one. They fell behind, got lucky off of a couple of walks by the Guardians' left-handed pitcher to tie that game. They had, I believe, 3 RBI walks in that game, and in the ninth inning, Travis Bazzana made a bad read on a ball hit right at him by Luke Keeschel. The Guardians then Matt Festa walks the next guy. Alan Roden gets his chance to shine, and he gets a walk-off hit to the gap. 2 RBIs in his season debut for him.
Yeah, that was really good to see Roden come through there in that situation. He's a guy that we've all, been clamoring for to see at the big league level. He's 25, 26 years old now. He's proven he's a really good AAA player, so it's time to figure out if he is a good MLB player or not. His results outside of that for his first few games have been, mixed, but it's been 10 at bats or something. But he's a guy that I have hope for. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen him in center field yet. We've seen Keeschel out there, which we were all right about Keeschel not being a long-term second baseman. If he can stick in center field, that would be a really good development for the Twins.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think Keeschel profiles better. He's more athletic, but a big part of when they kept hyping Roden up was that he could hold up in center field. So if they've already moved off of that, that's not great to his long-term utility. So he is a good corner outfielder, and if let's be honest, if you're going to be the 4th outfielder behind like Jenkins, Buxton, and Emma, you're going to have plenty of playing time, sadly.
Yeah, and the thing about Keeschel in the outfield so far, in the 5 or 6 games he's played so far, he's actually not looked bad there. And his arm was kind of a concern for me when he moved out to the outfield, but he's actually made a couple of decent throws. He hasn't thrown anybody out yet, but his throws have been able to make it to home plate, to make it a semi-close play. In center field, center field and in right field, he's made a couple of nice plays, ranging over to the ball on a fly ball that doesn't look like anyone else would catch. But like you said, Luke Keeschel has really good athleticism and speed already. So I'm interested to see more of him in this spot in the outfield. But I would like to see Roden at least play a game in center field. Doesn't have to be like a full game, but I just want to see a couple innings out of him.
I will say Insider brought up, the future outfield in 2027 and beyond. Just assume that's going to be Jenkins, Buxton, and Emma in however you want to align them defensively. I think you want the 4th outfielder ideally to be right-handed, just because especially if Roden's not going to play center field much, which he certainly isn't going to play center field over Buxton, and then along with Keeschel. The one knock on Roden is you would want that, 4th or 5th outfielder to be right-handed ideally to platoon with those 2 young lefties. Roden isn't that. So I wonder if, we saw the Twins make a minor buying move. If, they're going to make more of these small trades, I wonder if Roden is a guy that they kind of dangle out, as a potential return for somebody. He's a guy that should still have a little bit of value. You know, the Twins valued him enough to take him on as a second piece in the Varland trade last year. That worked out very well for the Blue Jays, as Varland was named to an All-Star, as we all know. I wonder if Roden is a guy that maybe isn't long for the organization.
I feel like that's kind of their hope. I feel like their hope is that he plays well for a little bit, flip him for something helpful, reliever, platoon guy, whatever, and then you just get into the Jenkins era. I feel like that is kind of what they want if things work out that way.
Yeah, and there's, we talk about small margins in the pen, but, given that there's a lot of lefty outfielders already on this team, and Austin Martin's really cooled off over the last month or so, what's stopping them potentially getting another right-handed bat? Why not just spitballing Lane Thomas or one of the guys from Colorado, though I believe both of them are lefties, but another right-handed outfielder that can slot in and be in the lineup against left-handed hitters. I'm just really thinking about Jordan Luplow type. Roden, I want to see a little bit more from him, but there is interest there. To me, it's just that the fact that there is so many lefties in this lineup, that on this roster, that I'm just thinking of where are they going to make a small move for a right-handed hitter, maybe.
The Twins did get some right-handed pop back into their lineup yesterday, with Ryan Jeffers being activated from the IL after his injury that saw him miss, I don't know, what was it, almost 2 months probably. The interesting thing to me is they optioned Kyler Fedko, so they have 3 catchers on the roster. Obviously, they're headed into the All-Star break just a few days from now. So this to me points to, and we've heard whispers that the Twins, regardless what they do at the deadline, Ryan Jeffers is going to be dealt. This to me, kind of confirms that, because Alex Jackson is a guy who I believe is out of options. If they were to DFA him at this point, I think he would get claimed. He played well enough in his 6-week stint with the Twins. I think he would get claimed. So I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, this certainly points to me that Ryan Jeffers has another 3 weeks as a Twin, and then he's probably wearing a New York Yankee uniform.
It means they're leaving the door open to that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's foregone they do it, or if they got hot, they would just keep him and then DFA Jackson. But it certainly is leaving that door open, wide open.
Yeah, the door is open, and I think what I'm thinking is that I don't really know how Jeremy Zoll is going to operate this deadline. I'm not really sure how the Twins just in general are going to operate. Made the small move yesterday, but just in terms of handling Joe Ryan and Ryan Jeffers, are they going to hold out for try to get the best deal possible? Like, how good? Where's the team standing at the end of this month? Like, you're 3 games below 500 right now, but you're also just a game back of the wild card. So you could just completely give up, but I don't think that's what the fan base wants. And Tom Pohlad, that's just from his personality and how what things he has said at the beginning of the year, is that really how he wants to operate and bring this team in a positive direction. It's really interesting. I'm just not really sure how they're going to mainly operate. It's interesting how most of the AL is going to operate at this deadline.
Yeah, and it's not just what Tom Pohlad said at the beginning of the year. He had sounded like a breakfast with the media either before the Cleveland series or before the Angels series. I forgot exact what day it was, but Aaron Gleeman had an article about it. I'm sure some other writers did too, but Gleeman is the article that I got to read about it. Pohlad had a quote where he said, "We just have to effing win." And in the article, it made me think that if Pohlad was running the baseball operations, which he obviously isn't, and it did state in the article, like, he wants to let Zoll, be the general manager and do what's best. But it, to me, points out if the Twins are within 3 or 4 games, and I'm not even really concerned about the wild card, because I think that some team in the other 2 divisions, we've seen the Astros play much better. We've seen the Astros and Blue Jays come to life. I think the wild card is probably going to end up being out of reach for the Twins. The division is what I'm more focused on. I think if the Twins are within 3 or 4 games of the AL Central at the trade deadline, I think that Zoll and the rest of the front office are going to be pushed by Tom Pohlad to buy whether that's Tommy Nance types or they actually make a move for like somebody that fans actually give a shit about remains to be seen. But this article to me, made me think that if Pohlad has a say in it and the team holds up their end of the bargain, that the Twins are going to be buyers.
Yeah, I think that you're spot on. Like, because I don't, like you said, the Red Sox or Blue Jays, somebody will get kind of hot, but the White Sox and Guardians traditionally don't buy a lot. So if you're close enough to them, you could certainly probably outbuy them. I will say, I believe that breakfast was on Thursday morning. So in the we have to fucking win era, we are 0-2.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. You're kind of going after the same guys that the White Sox and Guardians might consider. And again, those are teams that don't really buy. I mean, the White Sox made a trade, but that wasn't necessarily buying a player. They're buying a pick. And I think, I do agree. If you're within reach of the division, then the division is really bad. It's really bad, especially this year. You'll make a push there. That's all your focus is. I do want to point out that the Red Sox are really hot, and the Tigers are really hot as well. And they might trade Tarek Skubal, they might not. That'll be a really interesting thing to monitor. They've been playing really good baseball over the last 3 weeks or so, and do they trade Tarek Skubal? They just got him back. They play better with him back. Yeah, that'll also be interesting. And also, Rock Chalowski just officially got confirmed to be picked number 1 overall on the broadcast, but I'm not looking at who the next 2 picks are going to be. I have an idea who the Rays are going to be. Their pick is in already. So if it's who I think it is, the Twins might be able to get their guy.
As I said, I think a smokescreen may have just been that. I think it might have been the 2 guys who were 1 and 2 for over a year might go 1 and 2. We'll see.
Yeah, this certainly the White Sox are more of a wild card to me than the Rays are. If the Rays don't select Emerson, I'd be very surprised. Their pick is in, so we'll see how long it takes them to actually announce that. We're not going to spoil the next 2 picks here just because it's a little more fun to get our live reaction in our opinion. So we'll see. Twins probably will have their selection, by 1 o'clock, hopefully. But speaking of buying, let's say the Twins are in a position to buy. What positions do you think? Obviously, relievers number 1, and that's the position that you have to give up the least to get. So that's something, even if they're on the peripheral of, being contenders, that's absolutely something I would want them to do, even if that's just trading for another Tommy Nance type. You're not going to have to give up anything else, but something that's going to move the needle a little bit more. What positions do you think they should be looking at?
That's a good, because I think the other one is starting pitcher. And Passan had that little preview where he did like a realistic and dream buy for every contending team. And Grady Emerson's official right now. Just get that out there to the Rays. But yeah, Passan did his article. I think it was maybe this Tuesday, something like that. And the Twins, he had starting pitcher, and he had Foster Griffin was the kind of low value guy, and the dream was Kevin Gausman. And I got to thinking about that. That would actually be really badass, because in a playoff rotation, you would be able to run out Ryan, Gausman, and Bradley. Like you talk about actual needle moving. That, I mean, he'd obviously also make 10 starts after the deadline, but a Kevin Gausman, a Sonny Gray, that's how you actually get like legit good, I think.
Yeah, the starters been brought up. My only concern is how much are you going to give up? But at this point, I'm not really concerned how much you give up, because you have, again, the depth to do so. And getting a Sonny Gray from somebody that's like within reach of you in this wild card race, in this division race, whatever, that would be a big statement. Foster Griffin as well. He's not a flashy name, but he's probably been the Nationals' best pitcher this year on a team that's been really, really good. But their pitching has been their downfall as well. And they could flip Griffin for a veteran. I believe Griffin is just on a 1-year deal, but that would be a really interesting pickup for the Twins, just as a pure rental, get a reliable third starter, because Prelip's on the IL. Zebby has been up and down as of late, and you can't really rely. And Bailey Ober is just Bailey Ober at this point.
It would also allow you to compress Rojas into like a reliever. But I just off the top of my head, I want like just expiring starters. We're not getting Skubal or Mize because I don't think they're doing in division. But you mentioned Foster Griffin, Sonny Gray, Kevin Gausman, Robbie Ray. There's a lot of quality veterans who would either be a 2 or 3 who are expiring. They're not going to cost like Walker Jenkins. You might have to give up a top 10 prospect, but you're not going to go crazy.
Yeah, Kevin Gausman is expiring, like you mentioned. I believe Robbie Ray is too. Sonny Gray does have a 2027 team option. If you do make that deal, you would obviously be in a position to pick that up. So he's probably, outside of the fact of being a former Twin, being a guy I like to watch, probably the guy I would have at the top of the list, just because you're getting him for a year and a half rather than just 10 starts like you mentioned. But if they do acquire a starter, I hope it's a guy that does line up into the playoff rotation, like acquiring a guy at, the Ober level or the Zebby Matthews level, just to provide more depth in the rotation doesn't really interest me. Like that's not really moving the needle playoff wise. So if they do go this route, I hope it's somebody that you trust to take the ball in the playoffs, which Gausman, Gray, Robbie Ray, those are all guys that you do trust. On the hitting side of things, I think I could see an outfielder maybe, or what are your guys' thoughts on maybe a shortstop? We've seen the Kreidler and Gray platoon with varying results. You wouldn't really want that in the playoffs. Obviously, the hope would be Kalen Culpepper comes up, but he's now injured, and I just don't know how much you can trust a prospect to push you down the stretch. The dog days of summer. How interested would you guys be in maybe a shortstop? Just a 2-month rental.
Are you talking about? Okay, I was going to say there's always the Volpe throw in if you do a Yankees trade. I suppose you could try to trade for Pena if you really wanted to. The Volpe throw in would be an interesting one because I think he's better than Kreidler or Gray. He's a good fielder. Like I said, I don't think you're getting Pena. You're not going to try to get like Bobby Witt, but IKF. Yeah, IKF would be. You're just talking about like a quality veteran who can lock it down and like actually hit a little, right?
Yeah, like somebody that's half a step or a full step better than Tristan Gray. I think Gray, I've talked about it enough. I just don't think he's really an MLB player. I thought for a while Kreidler was just going to take the job and Gray would kind of disappear off the roster, but Derek Shelton, for some reason, continues to start him. He's in the starting lineup once again today.
Well, Kreidler was the worst hitter in MLB for his first 4 years, and he kind of looks like he's back to that, sadly. I think the miracle run might be over for him. He's looked really bad for a while now.
Yeah, the point is neither of them are good, and now Kalen Culpepper is hurt. I think if you're going to go on the hitting side, that's the spot you go. You can also look in the outfield. There's always room there. We have Roden starting in one corner now, and also Larnach in the other. I don't think they'll probably try to trade Larnach, but I do think Larnach's ARB number after this year is going to be like 6.5, maybe 7 million. I think this is probably his last few months in the Twins organization. So it is possible they try to trade him. Rob Manfred is headed to the stage to announce the Twins selection. So we'll share that in just a few moments.
And there it is.
Yeah, the pick is Von Lackey, catcher from Georgia Tech, the consensus third player in this draft. The Twins follow the board, the pick that everybody wanted them to make. It is Von Lackey. What are your guys' initial reactions to the selection?
He's probably already a top 3 player in the top 3 prospect in the organization. Just again, Savers pick. You get the top one of the top 3 guys. This guy has so much power. If you watched him, I watched a little bit of his season in the ACC, and then a little bit of him in the NCAA tournament. That Georgia Tech team was really fun in general, but he was he was the main catalyst. Such a really versatile and dynamic guy, and well-rounded player, as you can see on the screen over there. But the power is really what intrigues me, and there's just not a catcher like this with his hitting tool just doesn't come up that much nowadays, and this is an excellent pick. I don't really have a lot else to say. It's the top 3 player, and you get him at 3.
Yeah, it just didn't get too cute. He had a bunch of steals. He's a good blocker. He's a good framer. Catchers develop a little slower compared to some players, but he like Troy said, you just took the third best player and because he's a college guy, he'll be up relatively quickly. I've been teasing at this for a while. To me, with this guy in your system, you can feel free to throw Taillon in whatever trade you want. I know he's had a bad year in A-ball. Taillon's not your best catching prospect anymore. So with him, just feel free to throw him in however you want if you need to make a trade happen.
Yeah, you can dangle Taid. That's something that I didn't really think of, but I like Eduardo Taid as a prospect. But now you have Von Lackey, and he's way more polished. He is again way more well-rounded. I'm really I'm whenever he plays his first game, which is probably going to be at low A or maybe even high A, that will be appointment television for me. And I'm really hoping that he can get the ground running in terms of hitting well at high A or low A. And this is a guy that is just absolutely he's amazing. It's about 772 slug in the ACC, one of the best college baseball conferences. He faced a lot of really high-end talent in that league, and he just mashed. And this is a guy but there is not a lot of catchers that have this amount of versatility.
Not that he was going to stay anyway, but I think this. I could be overthinking, but I feel like this also slams the door on Jeffers coming back for some record-setting AAV. I think he's certainly out the door now. You got Caratini for a year, and then hopefully you can pretty much turn it over to Lackey.
Yeah, like you said, I don't really know that was on the table regardless, but this certainly, like you said, does seem to close that door and probably makes it all that more likely that Jeffers was traded, although maybe that doesn't really matter because it's not like Lackey is going to be up this season anyway, or probably even next. I know Troy mentioned his debut. He's almost certainly going to go to normal A-ball, maybe finish the year at high A in Cedar Rapids, but all their prospects start in Fort Myers. So like Troy said, that'll probably be 3 weeks from now after he gets signed and gets everything squared away, does all of his media appearances with the Twins and whatnot. But this is a guy I want to take a look at the Twins' top prospects and where you think Von Lackey ranks there. Let me pull up the Twins prospect list here, and I'll share that on the screen. So we have Walker Jenkins 1. I don't think that Von Lackey is going to rank higher than him. Kalen Culpepper 2. I also think Lackey ranks behind him. Where I would rank him is somewhere around the 3, 4, 5. I would personally have Rodriguez ahead of Taillon. I'm not sure about you guys, but I think I would have Lackey somewhere between the 3rd to 5th best prospect in the Twins organization out of the gates.
I think Taillon, I think Lackey will probably end up being a better pro than I have a lot of fears about Rodriguez, but yeah, I think Rodriguez has done it in AAA, so he'd probably be 3 and then Lackey 4, I think.
Yeah, he's either 3 or 4 for me. Ideally, when these prospects graduate at some point, he's going to be easily the number 1 guy. He's definitely the most intrigued. I think he's one of the more intriguing guys in the system now, just because how good he is behind the plate, and again, the power speed combo. There's just so much to like about. Von Lackey, and the fact that you get him at 3 is insane.
Yeah, absolutely. The Twins will have another selection today. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen till like 5 p.m. or so. This new draft format that the MLB has is excruciatingly long for absolutely no reason. I saw the schedule. The 40th and beyond picks aren't scheduled to start until like 4:30 Central Time. So we will not be live for that pick. We will put a short out with whoever they pick. The first few picks are, guys that could threaten the top 100 at some point. Then beyond that, you're kind of into wild card territory.
Yeah, there are some guys I've heard that I would hope would fall, but I really doubt that's going to happen. One guy that I know that I really would want to fall is Mason Edwards out of USC, but it seems like he's going somewhere in the first round. But if he somehow fell to the second round, I would really want the Twins to take him. But unfortunately, there's a lot of these guys are really just kind of unpredictable. They'll probably take somebody under slot. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, they have done somewhat good with those picks over the last few years. That's when Connor Prelip was taken a few drafts ago. Riley Quick in the last draft was their second overall pick in the 30s somewhere. So you can get a guy that is pretty interesting with that pick. It's definitely worth paying attention to who they select here. It seems like they typically go pitcher with that spot.
Yeah, they also somewhere in between like 40 and 80, they always go with the college bat first, like the Steer, Keishel. I think Jeffers was in that range. So yeah, that earlier one will probably be a pitcher. Then the next one after that will be some usually kind of bat first college player, like corner outfielder.
Yeah, I think Billy Amick was maybe also around there. Maybe
Yeah,
he was a bit
around
later.
that
I don't remember
range too.
exactly.
Yeah, I would guess this is going to be a pitcher next. Whoever they pick at 43, and then later down the line, yeah, they'll probably take a college bat, a little bit more proven. There's a couple guys that, some people are really rate high, but might slip down the board. Ryder Helfrich might be in the first round, might not. So another catcher, but who knows? Just another guy I've thought of that. If they didn't get Lackey, obviously they probably won't take him, but he's a guy I really like too.
Yeah, and then in like the 5th round and beyond, they basically exclusively take pitchers and work their magic on them. They've had success with those guys as well. As Zebby Matthews is one that comes to mind. Their top 20 prospects are usually filled with guys that weren't taken super high, but they added a few miles an hour to their fastball. And
Andrew Morris was one of those guys.
Somewhat intriguing options. None of them have like hit amazingly to this point, but they're filler depth that look interesting, and most of them should probably end up being traded, but aren't.
Yeah, they love their college pitch. Well, I think what they do is they take these college pitchers with good command, right? Who don't throw that hard, then they add a bunch of velo, or they add off speeds, or
yes, it's kind of like in the what Ober ideally was like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was fun. If you guys have any other things you want to hit on quickly before we wrap up, otherwise, I think we've hit basically everything that we wanted to get to, unless I'm forgetting something.
No, I think we've hit everything on the head. Twins play in about 10 minutes from now, so we get to watch Twins game after Von Lackey. Really exciting day, I think, for the organization. You get somebody with such a potentially high ceiling, and even if it doesn't quite reach that ceiling, probably a really solid major leaguer, especially with the tools he has.
I just want to say that they have two. Given who's pitching for the Twins, these are two must-win games. I say that unironically for once.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, actually. Like, people throw must-win around kind of in jest sometimes, especially around this team. And are they like must-wins? Obviously, no. But winning both,
if you want to be competitive,
would go a long ways. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Like if the team wants to be in a position to buy, like we know they do, you have to win a series at home against the Angels. Last night's game was really annoying. That Shawnuel catch to end the game, I thought that was ticketed for a double down the line, which would have tied the game. He made probably the best defensive play he'll ever make in his career. To win that one, just really frustrating.
Yeah, really frustrating game last night. Twins got a lot of guys on. They were hitting. They had really good process at the plate.
Even that first inning, just you could tell it was like 5 ace swings in a row, and they got one.
They had 5 straight barrels in a row in that first inning. Just it seemed like there was just one of those nights they were gonna put up 8 runs and eight or more runs, and it just didn't happen. And Zebby just couldn't quite hold on, though he did get through 6 innings. So the bullpen was a little bit saved, but it was a really frustrating game last night. Hopefully, though, they're ready to bounce back against the pitcher who has, I believe, a 6.24 ERA today.
Yeah, I think it was 7. Real quick, I saw the Pirates have taken this guy, the 12th ranked Derek Curiel, corner outfield, left-handed hitting. Yeah, I get that would have been a Falvey pick, I guess.
That's
corner
a really
outfielder, overdrafted, I think.
Yeah, a little bit overdrafted. Sutter Chatterman, they don't really like the pick. He's another college guy, fun player. I don't think I would have taken him at 5.
Yeah, the Pirates have had kind of a magic touch, though. I guess I'll give them some. I'll let them cook.
You give them some leeway, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, look, nobody knows anything about any draft ever, and that's especially true with the MLB draft, where, like I talked about earlier, these guys are going to play 1, 2, 3 years of minor league baseball, added with the complexity of the signing bonus pool in baseball's draft that you don't have in the NBA or NFL. So like everybody's guessing to a certain extent. So like, look, this pick could work out great. It could be bad. You know, nobody really knows.
Yeah, and I don't really have, because of the way this draft was set up for months, I basically knew the 3 guys and Flora and Fluky, and that was about it. So I got nothing else to say about these draft picks now. Good luck to all of them.
Yeah, good luck. Just really interested to see how this shakes up. Again, really excited for Von Lackey's debut, which will probably be in about 2 weeks, I would say.
Yeah, 2-3 weeks. The Twins add Von Lackey to the organization, the 3rd overall pick, catcher out of Georgia Tech. He'll be somebody that we talk about plenty on the show. The Twins, like Troy said, play a ball game here in just a few minutes. So we're going to get going to watch that. 2 must-win games for the Twins as we head towards the All-Star break. For Troy and Twins Insider, I'm Twins Central. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.